So here I am in my studio and I'm going to do more painting today. I thought I would just talk a little bit more about the equipment I use actually, because I do a lot of painting with a palette knife, which I never expected to do. My father used to use a palette knife, but I found it amazing. And as you will find out, as if you watch some of my videos, I use fan brush a lot. So I'm going to make a point of actually showing you some techniques I use with my paintbrushes, using a fan brush and the different fan brushes I use, using a palette knife and how I use it for various things, and also using brushes to stipple. So this one is just a plain flat brush, but I can use it to stipple. I can use other brushes to stipple to get different effects. Maybe I used one when I was painting a seascape recently to get some stippling on the sand as the sea came in and left it slightly rucked up. I can use it for foliage. So there's lots of things I can do with my paintbrushes, even though they look like they kind of just put paint on.
So as you can see, I love trees, and these are some birch trees and bluebells, another one of my favourites, bluebells. This is what the painting overall looked like when it was finished. More birch trees, this time with a kind of an autumnal feel to them, and painting in some autumn foliage. And again, this is what the final painting looked like. And yet another one. As you see, I really do like trees. And this one, I've tried to get a bit of a sense of distance in it. So you can see those trees in the background are quite faint. This is the painting I'm going to do today. This is the picture I'm going to paint. And again, you can see it's birch trees, but I'm going to add a little bit more to it. I'm going to add some bluebells. So let's get started. So here I am painting a treescape, and you can see I've already done quite a bit to it. I've already blocked in some of the very dark greens around the edge, which are made up of sap green and Payne's grey, and a very dark central part because it was a bit like a tunnel going into this treescape and the woods. And then some lighter green, which is sap green, a little bit of cadmium yellow and some titanium white in the middle. And now, of course, I'm just kind of softening up the very dark and the lighter bits. So I'm adding in some lighter patches and a few little bit of highlight, but I will do a bit more. So I'm going to fan brush this. As you know, I love fan brushing. So I'm doing this in layers because I always paint in layers. So this is the first layer, and I'm blending in the colours I've got on here just to create a base really for me to start putting more detail onto. Now remembering to do the sides. I paint on canvases, and so I always try to remember to paint the edges as well, so I paint in the same colour. Otherwise I have to mix another colour up later and go back and do it, which is a bit boring. And so here I am. I'm softening it all over so that I have a good base. I might change fan brushes, and I will see what I end up with. So now I can add in some of the lighter spots, the sunlight patches. So I'm going to add in some of the sunspots now, the sunlight patches, and I'm going to use titanium white and lemon yellow here, so it's very sharp. I will soften it perhaps a little bit with some cadmium yellow deep, but I want that very bright sunlight peeking through to come up, and I'm patting it on with my palette knife, as I've shown you I do in the seascape I painted earlier. I'm spreading it around. I'm going in the direction the sunlight's coming through, and now I'm going to add in a little bit more of the cadmium yellow just to make that a little bit warmer, but tone it down a bit, so for those shadowy parts at the bottom. And I'm going to fan brush again to soften it, because again this is going to be another layer. I don't want this to be too definitive, so I will soften it up, so I can go back to it later and add some more onto the top of it. So here we are. Change brushes from time to time, so I'm going from a firmer one to a much softer one. This one really softens the blending of the colour, because it's such a very soft brush. Remembering to clean very well in between, because again, of course, I'm going to be picking up colour and spreading it around. I don't want to do that too much. Then I'm going to clean my palette off because I'm going to want to make a nice space for me to mix other colours, and although it's nice having colours that you've been using on your palette, you can sometimes get a bit clogged up with them. So now I'm going to start putting in the birch trees. Now I'm going to do this really literally by just tapping on a base layer of titanium white, because the birch trees are really underneath it, that silvery white, and I'm going to place the trees onto the picture strategically. So I'm going to go either side, so I know that I've got the trees positioned in the right place, and then I can move outwards from that, or inwards when I'm adding a few of the smaller trees in the background. Now literally you can see I'm just patting that paint on. I'm not covering everywhere. There are some gaps, and so it's a little bit patchy, and that helps giving that effect of the patchiness and the dark and the lights on the birch trees themselves. Now as I go into the distance, the trees will get smaller and a bit lighter, and I don't want to put too many in, so although there's a lot of trees in the picture I'm painting, I'm not going to go too mad. I'm going to put them in, as I said, strategically. And you can see the one I'm putting in now is actually a little bit lighter than the ones that are further forward. So they're in the background and the brighter, lighter ones are in the foreground. So this helps to give a sense of space and perspective. So now I'm also going to add in the darker areas. So all those little patchy bits where the bark is peeling off, and I'm literally going to tap it in on the edge using the very edge of my palette knife. So I scrape my palette knife through the dark colour, Payne's Grey in this instance, and I just tap it onto the edge of the tree to give it a bit of definition, and then I will spread it across slightly, so I create some of that bark effect of where the bark is peeling away and cracking. So I end up with the trees defined, all of the trunks defined, and I can add in little bits more detail where I need to, not going too mad, because actually less is more. And again, it's always about creating an impression. So if you get up really close, it just looks like black and white paint spread around, but from a distance, which is where obviously you're going to be looking at a painting from, it gives the impression of a tree with its a silver birch tree with its bark peeling and cracking and spreading up the tree, so that your eye actually creates that impression. Your brain fills in what it expects to see, and there you are, you have birch trees, even though actually you've all got is black and white paint. So once I've done that, I will add in foliage. I will use a stippling brush. I could also use a palette knife, so I will put some on with palette knife, and I also will stipple. You get slightly different effects using palette knife and stippling brushes. When you want more blocky dark colours in, which of course why I'm starting off with dark here, putting in the really dark areas, because again I'm working on this basis of layering up the paint over the top of each series of colours and tones I'm putting in there. And so I'm going to block in the edges, I'm going to block all around, and I'm going to sort of create those shadows and create some of those tiny little branches coming off the main trunk. Not too much, I don't want to go too mad, but I can do them equally well with a palette knife as with a brush. Now I'm also going to add in the darks on the forest floor. So it's a mix of dark and light. So I'm using Payne's Grey and Sap Green, but darkened up a lot. A little bit of burnt umber in there as well to add a bit of warmth. And I'm just touching it in. So there is a sense of movement and shade, and also creating that depth of field by putting in a little bit of that darkness. Now, also softening it up with my fan brush, again always remembering to clean carefully in between, because actually the darker the colour, of course, the more effect it has. And then once I've got that in, I've got a base for the rest of my foliage to go in, actually into the forest floor. So I will start to put some of that in here, and the lower foliage, the grasses, and also the darks and lights here. So I've got some sunlight in there too, but I'll come back and do that later. So I'll tap in a few little bits just to warm it up, but don't want to put too much in because it's all about less is more, you know. Don't put too much in there, just keep it flowing and keep it subtle. Subtlety is very important. So I'm also going to soften up those colours there that I've added in, those lights, so that again I'm building up layer by layer, and again I'm trying to create a sense of depth of field here, perspective. So closer up we've got some light. So you can see I've actually gone through and worked this over quite a bit now, and I've been adding in a little bit more detail, and I want to put in some of the sunspots now, really bright sunspots. So I'm going back to titanium white and lemon yellow, because there is a very, very bright sunlight that's coming through, peeking through those trees. And I'm putting it only in patches. I'm not putting a lot in there because it comes through in little patches, dappling through the trees. So bit of a cheat here, I am adding in bluebells. So I'm adding in the stalks with the edge of my palette knife. Again, this is a mixture of Payne's grey, lemon yellow, a bit of sap green, and some titanium white. So I'm getting various shades of green, light and dark in there. Spreading around, again, not too much. And I'm thinking about where I'll have little clumps of bluebells growing. And then I will go back and add in the actual bluebells themselves. But look, you see I'm using the edge of my palette knife. Again, using my palette knife a lot when I'm painting here, and not worrying about making this really definite. I'm not painting individual petals, I'm stippling here with the edge, the very tip of a fan brush. In fact, this is quite a stiff fan brush. I'm mixing up the blue. The blue is a mix of cerulean blue, French ultramarine, and a little bit of permanent mauve with some titanium white. So it's a fair old mix of colours to create that kind of purpley blue that bluebells are. And I'm just stippling them in at the tops of some of those fronds of stems and grass I put in there. So I've just got a smattering of bluebells there, not too much, but just giving the effect that where you would have a little few clumps of bluebells growing in this wood. And you can see I haven't been too definite with the where the trees have gone into the foliage. I've left that a little bit to the imagination. So as you step back, you kind of, your eye fills in what's there, but I can lighten up some of those dark bits with a little bit more of my bluebell coverage, and I'm putting some of them into the background too. So I hope you enjoyed that, painting trees. As I say, I love painting trees, and here is the finished painting, a little bit closer up, and you can see some of the detail there. So if you enjoyed this, please do subscribe to my channel and have a look at some of my other demos. And also, please do go and have a look at my website, www.deborahmartin.co.uk, where you find lots more information about painting and painting tuition. And thank you for watching.